Thank you very much. Great pleasure to talk about the study that actually really I'm like is very close to what I'm doing and what is important to me, and that is mountains. You know, like my the professorship is mountain ecology, so you know it fits pretty well. And you may wonder, I mean, why mountains? You know, why mountains? And one answer to that question would be the same as Mallory. Do you know who that is? Mallory, a British mountaineer who tried to climb Mount Everest 2 times. I think third time he didn't come back, unfortunately. Maybe bad start. But what he said when like he was asked why the heck why do you want to climb this mountain that is so cumbersome at the time, with equipment? And he said because it's there, it's there, and this is like this is already part of the answer. Mountains are there, and then the question would be, how much of mountains do we have? Well, we find them at 27% of the land area and 1/8 of the world's population. So it's disproportionately low, of course, the population in these areas. In Europe, we have a bit more, like 30% of the land and 17% of the population living there. So it's probably not the people really or population density that makes you think about mountains, But mountains definitely, I mean, we will see that they're very important, and it makes sense to really learn about mountains and the forests they have. And the first argument here is mountains are called the water towers of the world. And then why this, why water towers? And they are actually responsible for over half of the drinking water that is generated globally. 27% of the area, but around between 55 and 60% of the drinking water is generated in mountains. Why? Because, we get orographic rains, so a lot of rain is generated in mountain areas. They have less transpiration because trees and plants grow slower, and less evaporation because it's cooler. So, they tend to really produce water for the world, and a lot of people are really depending on this water. We can see that there's 1.8 billion people in lowland regions that depend on mountain runoff. That will increase to roughly something like an estimate of 2.5 billion people, really depending on the water generated in mountains. And mind you, 40% of our food production comes from irrigated agriculture, and 68% of the irrigated land depends on these waters, So we can safely say that, mountain areas also feed the world, not because they produce a lot of agricultural products, but they produce water that we really strongly need. Not only that, they're also like hubs of biodiversity, really. Mountain areas are harsh regions, aren't they? And there's less interest in converting the land to agriculture or to other land uses. So, it's just the leftovers. These are mountains, land that is not good for anything else, actually. So we left it. There's a higher ratio of land that has not been converted or, changed in any way. And so no wonder we have 25 out of 34 biodiversity hotspot in or partly in mountain regions. So water biodiversity, but the mountain areas are strongly affected by, for instance, climate change, by the climate crisis. And this is just a very recent example for a book chapter that we wrote and have submitted now for the Routledge Book of the Mountains. And it shows the global, no, not the global, the Alpine, that's the Alpine arc, you know, and this is 200 kilometers here. The distribution of montane mixed mountain forests, that is spruce, beech, and fir forests. And what we see is that in the 1960s, this is the green distribution, like they have quite a wide distribution, and this is going to shrink because these forests will actually move upwards, you know, and they will thereby also be something like the engine to the escalator of extinction of alpine species, you know, they're kind of pressed up. And then if the mountains are not high enough, the habitat will be lost because these forests will actually take it. But the area will actually go down quite a lot, from 31% of the area to 11%. So just as a, you know, as a small example of like, okay, you know, we're expecting drastic changes. So we have to deal with them. We have to cope with it. We have to know what we are doing here. But mountains here, I said, they also hold potential. Why is that? It's very easy for a plant actually to change the position from, let's say, a sun-exposed slope to a shady slope, thereby actually changing its environment quite drastically to by a few degrees, you know. So that might be enough for some species to survive in very close distance, you know. You just change the aspect of where you're growing. If you do that by moving north, for instance, you know, you have a way, way longer distance to cover. So mountains hold a potential for being refuge areas for plants in the future. So they're threatened. At the same time, they hold quite a potential for providing the refuge areas for a lot of plants. But they are also sometimes coined as poverty traps, you know, like what does that mean? Well, mountain people, 80% of generally of people affected by extreme poverty live in rural areas. So that the face of poverty is rural, globally, is rural and is young, you know. So, but you know, rural areas face a very high poverty rate, and then in mountain regions, this is more severe than in lowland areas. So we have around from 1.1 billion people in 2017 living in mountain areas. 1 billion people live in Africa, Latin America, Oceania, and Asia. Many of those in very poor areas. And mind you, I mean, mountain regions, they're poor regions. Agriculture is difficult in these regions. So the climate is harsh. The distance to the markets normally is far. Infrastructure is not well developed normally. So it's hard to live in the mountains. Like our development, like our mountain areas, this is quite exceptional and also quite young, you know. Like a lot of our living in mountain areas comes from tourism, and tourism is not a very old phenomenon, you know. Some areas that are amongst the richest areas in Austria today have been very poor areas like 100 years ago. In the Tyrol, people were in mountain villages, actually were too poor to feed their children. They had to send them to Germany for work, for instance. And also, this was the reality 100 years ago. And similar things are actually happening in many mountain regions in the world. So half of the people in these rural areas are actually affected by food insecurity. So food insecurity is very high in mountain regions, simply because it's harsh to live there. And now you may wonder, yeah, okay, all fine, you know, but then why, you know, why do I need to know? And there is one more thing actually that we should mention here, and that is education and its role. So you see we're coming closer to the Mountain Forestry Master's course here. What we also see is not only like, you know, strong regional differences in poverty rates, for instance, but we also see differences like a real knowledge divide, differences in education. And if we kind of believe that education is a strong lever to alleviate poverty, which it is actually, then this matters. You know, we see that that's the education index, that is the years of schooling, the expected years of schooling, and an index made from there, and that is like, you know, 0.445, maximum would be 1, you know, and then for Europe it's 0.85 or so. So we see huge regional disparities, don't we? And we also have a very strong rich country bias in how we tackle our crisis, you know, our multi-crisis. So we have strong potentials to do research in adaptation measures, you know. So we in rich countries, you know, whereas this is not the case for many poor countries, like mountainous regions. And so and we see this here. You see the distributions of publications on climate change, and this is the number of publications carried out in different regions. The darker it is, the more there is. So we see the light colors here in poor areas. You know, means there is way less research done on this topic. We've once looked into the Human Development Index, a composite index of human development and its relation to publications on forest and climate change. And we see a strong function there, you know, like this is in slices of Human Development Index. We had a look into how many publications are there for countries with a very low HDI and then with a high one. And we see that there is a very strong signal that shows the same thing, basically. So we have a number of publications in and authored by, carried out in and authored by scientists in richer countries and very few in poorer countries. So climate change is caused in the north and mitigated and adapted, like solved, not really solved, but adapted to in the north as well. You know, so there's a bit of a pretty unfair situation, actually. And now, why care? You know, well, education. And this is now encouraging. You know, this is encouraging story now, because education really makes a difference. I tell you, and we were very happy when we saw this study. This is a study from Lutz et al., published in Science quite a time ago, and it was actually. Lutz is a demographer, quite a famous one in the Austrian Academy of Sciences and in JASA here in Luxembourg, Luxembourg, and he actually worked out different education scenarios and had a look into how these scenarios actually are expressed in terms of GDP growth. Now you may say, well, GDP is really not the only measure for, like, you know, livelihoods, which is true. So that's why we showed the HDI, the Human Development Index, before. But still, you know, let's see. And we had different scenarios here. Like the first one, the worst one is 50% of people have no education, then 40 primary and 10 secondary education. Well, that's a pretty poor GDP growth, annual GDP growth rate. The best one is 50% primary and 50% secondary. So no people who have no formal education at all. But then what I'd really like to draw your attention to is the scenario 4 that has actually, just as in the scenario 1, 50% of people without education, but then 30% primary, 15 secondary, and 5% tertiary. And look at these significant differences between 1 and 4. So it's these 5% tertiary education really that mainly make a difference. You know? So this is pretty encouraging. You know? So this means people like, you know, academia, people who are studying, they really make a difference in GDP growth, and this is also expressed and should be expressed in improved livelihoods of people. So this should actually tell us why we should, you know, educate in mountain forests. So we can claim that mountain forests are critical resources They harbor biodiversity. They're the water towers of the world. They are also affected by poverty quite a bit, you know, and education in sustainable management of mountain forests is a lever for increasing sustainability and reducing poverty. So these were the ideas that we had, you know, when we have started with the master's course in mountain forestry in 2002, the International Year of the Mountains. This is, you know, since 2002 we have this master's course, and then you may ask, well, why BOKU? Why, you know, like it could be anywhere, right? But I tell you, it's the only master's course in mountain forestry worldwide, the only one at BOKU. But then why here? I mean, why us? And the answer would be that, well, we've seen very similar situations in our mountain regions as compared to many mountain regions globally, right? And so we see that there was people were living on fodder collection in steep areas. There was lopping of trees. There were all sorts of land use practices actually that were geared towards like surviving in difficult, harsh terrains, right? Exporting nutrients from the forest into agriculture. So there was huge harvesting activities in 19th century in Austria. So forests would actually fuel early industrialization. You know, charcoal was produced in huge quantities, and we have almost clear cut all our forests with very few exceptions. You know, but then you know we kind of managed. And we were lucky, you know, it's not that we were so clever, but we were mainly lucky with our climate, you know, so it was possible to regenerate the forests. And then we slowly learned that with these clear cuts, you know, we get all sorts of problems, increased runoff you know, in steep slopes, avalanches, landslides, all massive problems. And we have learned that the lesson actually. So we do think that we are actually pretty good in sustainably managing forests. Could be better still, but you know, like we're not too bad in an international comparison. So we've had all this history and we're aware of it, and we learned our lesson, and we also are active in many mountain regions worldwide, like in the Himalayas, in East Africa or so, you know. And we thought that the experience that we've gained is really something to share. We realized that education in sustainably managing these forests really is an issue. And then, so, you know, we thought, let's do a master's course. This was, by the way, the first English master's course at BOKU. It was the first master's course anyway, because at that time, 2002, BOKU did not have a bachelor and master course structure. So it was an university special like construction legally that we needed for being able to start this. And now we defined mountain forestry as a sustainable, and we still do, sustainable science-based management of forests and woodlands in mountain areas, taking specific ecological, ethical, technical, social, economical, and political conditions of complex mountain systems into consideration. So you think that we have quite a holistic approach to mountain regions and to their forests. Like forests really are modulating what happens in mountains with nutrients, with water, and so on. So forests are actually, you know, a very critical resource in mountain regions. Now, one of the objectives of the study program, the objective really is to provide a focused and specialized education in managing mountain forest resources with a global perspective. So you can, we always have students from Austria, but we have very international classrooms normally. Like we have students from many different continents, very often in one classroom. So that makes teaching very rewarding actually here. We teach students to recognize and solve problems that occur in forest management and conservation, and we strengthen interdisciplinary approaches in mountain forestry, integrate aspects of engineering, socioeconomics, natural sciences, and other fields in mountain forest management. So as any BOKU study, the study here rests on the three pillars. You know, we have these three pillar principle since very long. There's technology and engineering, natural sciences and economic and social sciences. And the study actually combines this just as any BOKU study does, you know. And we consider this as particularly important because working in mountain regions is a very delicate socioeconomic task as well. So it's not only the natural sciences, the technology and the ecology of these ecosystems that is challenging, but also its socioeconomic foundations. Now, this is how the study looks like now, but it won't look like that exactly in, like something like 2 years' time, because we are kind of reforming it. We are starting to think of like a different approach to modularization. The good thing is that it is actually, I think, the only or one of the very few master courses that had a module system right from the beginning in 2002. But then like the modules are the big headers, and then we have still all these small courses under these headers. The headers here are for the compulsory modules. That's an introduction to mountain forestry and scientific skills. And then the ecology of mountain forests, economic and social dimensions, inventory and monitoring, forest management for goods and services, and forest engineering. So these are the compulsory modules, and we have a number of courses under these headers, and what we really are proud of is that we have like topics that matter a lot for our global perspective, like agroforestry in mountain regions that are not taught at BOKU otherwise. Agroforestry, a combination of trees and agricultural crops in a sequence or at the same time. And livestock or livestock. So we have courses like participative methods, like very practical methods. So we learn how to do stakeholder processes, how to work with stakeholders, and we have experts here who teach this. We have courses like project management that are also taught by internationally renowned experts. So we do have a number of courses that you don't have in forest sciences or so. So it's kind of really different, Question is, can you do one of the questions that may come up, can you do then the state exam for becoming a forest manager? Yes, you can actually. You have to have a set of courses, so there are some courses that you have to have for this, but if you like this, then you do these courses. And depending on what your bachelor is, it has to be a forestry related bachelor. If not, then difficult, but actually, basically, having a bachelor in a forestry related field, plus this course would actually entitle you to also manage forests in Austria. So currently we have close to 60 compulsory courses, 60 ECTS. This will be less in the future. So the compulsories will go down and the electives will go up. And so will the free electives, like the electives also in these modules of ecology of mountain forests, economic and social dimensions, inventory and monitoring, forest management for goods and environmental services, and forest engineering. And you have currently you have to select 10 ECTS out of one module, and then the rest of the 10 you have to have out of at least 2 other modules. There's a bit of a specialization there with the electives, and then, but also a distribution over other modules, just to make sure that you're educated in all these necessary pillars. Now, that's the number of students that we have actually from 2004, 2005, when we had the first alumni, and we see in blue female. We're very proud that we're having more female than male now. It's probably very unusual for a forestry-related study. And we also see this was the COVID drop, so obviously, like we had way less, of course, we had no people coming from abroad. International students were going down strongly, but then we're kind of slowly picking up again. So we're kind of doing okay in terms of student numbers. We're currently, but this will increase again, we're currently missing a little bit like students from the Himalayas and East Africa. We always had students from there. This has gone down quite a bit. We see, well, no, we don't see. This is just, well, I must admit this bit of an old map. The map would show way more countries in green nowadays. But this is a bit of a selection of countries where we had students from. And this is numbers here. So we had a number of students from Nepal, then Ethiopia and Bhutan. So they were making for more than half of the students in total. This is not the case now anymore because grants have been, like funds for grants have been cut down, unfortunately. And we have now, I'm just preparing another project that will bring in another 6 master students from Bhutan, actually, very soon. But generally, this has been reduced. But we do get like students from all over Europe and from North America into, and so both Canada and US in our study, which makes it really fascinating because, when these people start talking about their experiences. Very often they already have work experience in forestry. Then, like we're having really interesting discussions. What is also unique, I should mention, is we have the so-called field camps. They're like really pillars of the study. So they are 1 week field camp. The first one is Introduction into Austrian Forestry, like spearheaded and guided by Thomas Kirisitz, who has a very soft heart for students and like does a wonderful course a whole week out in Leerforst, but not only there, but there will be a trip up to Rax, to Burgenland, to like getting to know different landscapes and seeing their problems and getting to know each other, hearing about the problems of different, like of the students and the countries they come from. And then there are 2 other field camps combining different fields, like forest ecology and forest growth, silviculture and forest technology. So this is a pretty far-sighted structure. It's like what we envisage now with like the modularization has been. We've had this since 2002, and we made very good experiences with that. This is something we're going to retain for sure, or we'll even, increase, like learning out in the field, combining different subjects and bringing expertise together. Quite a fascinating structure. Now, what do our alumni, what do they do? We have the most of them ends up in government organizations. Like this is the first. Probably yes. It's two different years, but the first years actually, like he has become a forest director in Bhutan. We're very proud of him. Fento Tsering, for instance. He has done his doctoral thesis with me, just as Dr. Abraham Abio Hailo. We have other colleagues from Ethiopia who have done a PhD. So, and they're in good positions, like they're leading researchers in their field in CJR centers in Kenya, in Ethiopia, and so on. So we have some people working in national parks, quite a lot, almost 30% of the people who pursued a further study and did a doctoral study, So that is also something we're pretty proud of. So we have like close to 30% of the people who had done this master that has enabled them to really study, go on and become doctors. And with only 7% of people who don't get back into their home country. This is very important for us, like having students from regions like the Himalayas, East Africa. And there is always this allegation of like inducing a brain drain. Like, we're attracting the people, they're studying here, and then they're staying here. But you know, there is a lot of investment in these people, not only by us for the doctoral study, but or the master study, but even before actually, you know. So we're very proud that most of them actually get back home. So we have the master thesis in their home countries, always supported by KUBI stipends actually from BOKU or by project funds. Depending on how, you know, how we organize this. So and these 7%, these are people from, for instance, from Ireland, you know, then who think Austria is beautiful. So I'd rather stay in Austria than in Ireland, you know, which maybe I would understand actually. Somebody here from Ireland, hopefully not. So we don't induce brain drain problems here. That's the message, you know. So we have trained students from more than 25 countries. We do not cause a brain drain. We have more than 90% of the alumni is working in the field of expertise. More than 90%, you know, that's encouraging. And we do maintain a nice network with the alumni. It's like, it's very easy then, like we are, you know, there is a call out there for project money. We contact our partners, our alumni, and we ask them, shouldn't we do something together? Like most of them have done their doctoral study, and then we, you know, sometimes we do projects together and things like that. So that is quite nice. All right, so that was the brief introduction, and thanks for listening.